Hello, class. Welcome to week 7, part 2. Yes, we didn't finish everything we were talking about. So we need to go on to part 2. We have some very important concepts that we are covering this week, and I want to make sure you all really understand them. So where we left off was we were talking about drafting essays. This is an extremely important concept because I really want you to come away from this class with the understanding that writing is not a product. It doesn't just spring out of your head fully formed like the way Athena sprang out of Zeus's head. No, that is not the image we want. The image that we want is that we are on a train, and every moment of that train ride is enjoyable as we journey to our destination. That destination will be the final product, the writing. But all along the way, that process is just as enjoyable and important. We have to go to the meal car and eat food. We have to converse with other passengers. We have to look out the window and observe the beautiful views and see how the countryside changes. It is a process. Writing is a process in that very same way. And I'm going to pull up the writing process handout, okay? Right here. We can look at this. So the writing process is, as we said, a process, a many multi-step process that you go through when you write an essay, or at least you should, to be able to make your writing as deep and as effective as possible. You'll want it to be a process that occurs over a couple weeks even, maybe. I mean, if you were writing a novel, we'd be doing like a year. But this is an essay. So we have spent the past couple weeks, as you know, week 5, week 6, and week 7, reading essays and watching videos. And then we have met in class to discuss them in our virtual sessions. And we have also written about them in discussion forums, where we have gone back and forth with each other, where you've shared annotations from the different readings and videos, and you have explained why you annotated those things, the meaning that you pulled out of them, or the reason you connected with it. And we have then also commented on each other's annotations back and forth. You had to respond to at least 2 different posts each week. And then I also responded to your posts. So we have this very interactive discussion going on through the discussion forums and through the weekly virtual classes that have helped us undergo this writing process. And if you see down here, the very first step is read, reread, annotate. And I'm going to add to that watch, rewatch, and annotate, because that's what we're doing. We are watching videos and we're reading essays, and discuss. That's what we've been doing, right? We've been discussing them in our forums and in our virtual classes. All right, so you have the first 2 steps done already. And in addition to that, you have really been doing some brainstorming too, and even some planning, okay? Because we did summaries and we did free writing, and both of those activities lead to brainstorming and even some planning, depending on how far you got along in the free write. Now, the summary, as we mentioned before, you were just point by point telling us what the author was saying. You weren't infusing that summary with any of your own opinions or connections or ideas or questions or whatever. You just told me what the author said in fewer words than what the author said, without using the author's words as your own words unless you were using quotations, in which case they were in quotation marks. All right, so that was what a summary is, and you wrote one. And we also did free writing, and the free writing is where you had to reflect on the different videos and essays that we were reading in different websites. And in the free write, because it is free, it is literally free writing, you are then free to do everything that you could not do in the summary. You could put in opinions, you could put in reactions, you could agree, you could disagree, you could compare, you could contrast, you could make personal connections and tell me about those personal connections. You could see patterns emerging between them and discuss those patterns. All of that goes in a free write. The part that you had to do that was a requirement of the free write was that you had to write on not just anything out there in the world, but on weeks 5, 6, and well, not 7, we didn't the free write in 7, but weeks 5 and 6, those readings and videos. You could write freely about them. And so hopefully that has gotten you brainstorming, which means you have been germinating ideas. Those ideas and connections have been popping into your head, and maybe even there was some planning going on. In other words, if you got far enough along in your free write, you may have even pulled out some sort of pattern and started developing it into what could later become this week your draft. And this week we are drafting. That is not the final version of the essay. That happens next week. This week is a draft. And the draft is where you kind of do a very, very focused free write. You sort of run with your essay question and thesis statement, and you develop it as if you were writing an essay, a final draft, but it's not your final draft. It's the preliminary draft. So if you go off topic, that's okay. You can cut it off later. If you go off in a tangent and then start going off onto something that's not your thesis statement, also fine. You can rein yourself back in and cut that out and then get back on track with your thesis points. When you come up with your thesis statement, you should have an idea of thesis points, but as you get writing that draft, if other ones pop into your head, go for it. Put those in. You can cut those out later. Next week is our revision week, and that's when you can go back, look at your draft, and clean up things like extra points that, didn't really go anywhere, or extra points that went too far, so you need to cut those out, or points that, hey, they're kind of on topic, but I need to tweak them a little. If I word it this way, it'll have a little bit more to do with my thesis statement, and it will prove that point I want to make. But maybe it's a little thin, so I need to add a little to it to flesh it out. Okay. I maybe need to find a quotation because I have to use 3 sources, right, from weeks 5, 6, and 7. At least 3 sources. You can use a source outside of that, but you actually have to have 3 sources that come from some sort of reading that or video that we encountered in weeks 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so that is how you will revise your essay. So you see how you can't really make a mistake in your draft because you correct mistakes in the revision, which is next week. So feel free to run with the essay question you come up with and run with that thesis statement and those thesis points that first come to your mind and keep writing. And if new ones pop up in your mind, write those too. In fact, write more than what you need, okay? Because you can always chop out later. Think of it as like a sculpture. You got that big block of material, maybe it's a big piece of wood or a big piece of rock or clay, and that's okay, it's big, but then your revision process will chip away at it and carve out that figure. Or you can do a rough cut, right? That's what actually sculptors do first. They roughly cut things out to make their sculpture or their statue. And then after they have that rough cut done, they go back and they fine tune it. They sand it. They cut some more with their little scalpel tools and they shape it into the shape that they ultimately want. It's kind of like what a movie producer does too. Movie producers actually, they will storyboard their movie all the way through before they ever start filming. I mean, most do. I mean, you could have an avant-garde filmmaker, I guess, who just says, we're just going to shoot whatever, right? We're just going to point the camera and go and ad-lib. But a traditional filmmaker will storyboard the movie, and that means they'll have a picture. They'll draw out a picture, or if they're not artistic, they'll have somebody else draw it for them. That we'll have the figures in the scene, and for each scene, they will have a picture of what they are wanting to shoot. And they may have some words on the storyboard, but that's all planned out beforehand. All right. And so that's kind of what we're doing this week. We're kind of storyboarding your essay. That's what the draft is. And next week, we're going to even fine tune that storyboarding, so to speak. I'm going to give you a graphic organizer and you're going to fill that out based on your draft and see where you need to cut, where you need to expand, where you maybe need to put in another point, because you're going to see whether it follows that essay format, that basic essay format that I've outlined in previous weeks and that you implemented for essay 1, where you have your introductory paragraph that concludes in your thesis statement, and right above your thesis statement will be your essay question in that introductory paragraph, which you want to start with a hook. Go from the hook to the context. In other words, you can talk about some of the readings and videos you've watched, and then that leads into that question that you're asking, which is followed by that thesis statement, which is the answer to the question. And then after that question, you'll have the body paragraphs, which are the thesis points that are the little subpoints of that answer in the thesis statement that you're going to be giving. And you'll be developing each of those thesis points in a paragraph. In the first body paragraph will be thesis point 1, next body paragraph, thesis point 2, third body paragraph, thesis point 3. You can have more than 3 thesis points if you want, but 3 is a good number, like especially for a paper that is of this page length, that's about 3 pages long. At least 750 words, at least 3 pages long. Okay, and the 3 pages not include your works cited page. That's a separate page from the essay itself. All right, and then you will conclude the essay, of course, with the concluding paragraph that will recap or briefly restate that thesis statement, and then add the element of closure, that sense of completion. All right, so those are the main points of the basic essay format, which you will be planning out and trying to draft through this week. Don't worry about grammar. You can clean up the grammar and the word choice and the phrasing next week. This week, you can be messy. You can be all over the place. You can experiment. You can have fun. You can try out ideas, run with them, see where they go. And then next week, rein it back, carve out that figure, and shape that final product, polish it. All right, that's next week. This week is the messy draft period. All right, so here we are drafting. That's what we're doing this week. And then next week you'll be revising and proofing. And proofing is where it's that final read where you want to catch any places where maybe you left out words or you used the wrong word or the phrasing. You start off phrasing the sentence one way and then the second half of the sentence goes a different way. And you need to kind of redo that sentence, rephrase it in a way that doesn't change pace halfway through. Alrighty, so those are the steps of the writing process. Let's go back to our folder here. Brainstorming for writing. Several different ways to brainstorm. This is a funny little graphic here. It says, this is how you feel if you don't brainstorm. You're like, I don't know what to write. I have writer's block. I hear that all too much. Just sit down and write. Look, here's how you feel if you do brainstorm. You feel as if you got money. You hit the pot of gold. You hit the jackpot. You got bags of gold there, like a person who has really lucked out, but you didn't luck out, but because you put the time and the effort in, you actually worked for it. So here's a couple ways you can brainstorm. You can make lists of different ideas that occur to you. You can mind map, which means kind of like you draw things out, like you got maybe a center cloud here. Maybe you have some arrows coming off the cloud to like 3 subpoints. And then from those 3 subpoints, maybe they branch out into their little details, quotations, things like that. You can free write, which we already did. So, hey, we have already done this brainstorming. And if you need to do more, you may want to do some listing and mind mapping for this draft. That can at least get you kind of like that overall like skeleton of the essay in your brain, and then you'll just sit down and write. Okay? Try them all. Hey, I'm going to show you an idea here for me. If I were to do a draft, for essay 2, I might be like, okay, what's my question? Let's think about it. What is gender? Maybe too broad. All right, let's narrow it down. What is a woman? What makes a woman a woman? All right. Let's start listing. How about genetics? That'd be like from that chapter we read about sex and gender. How about physiology? Or maybe body parts, right? Oh, but sometimes people have confusing ones. Or sometimes they might have body parts that look one way, but inside they feel another way. We read some essays about that, right? Like the woman who was transitioning from the one gender to the other. Or like the man whose boy liked to wear little girl clothes. Or the girl who wanted to be a tomboy. So we did a lot of readings that kind of wrestled with these issues and how do we define what we are, and do we need to define what we are? Is that important? So those are all ideas that can feed into this essay. I'm excited for you, and I'm excited to read your drafts, and I'm excited for next week's process too. So